A lot of people are hesitant to show their code. Some fear that someone might steal their hard work, while others might be embarrassed because their code has flaws. But I'm not one of them. In this video I will show you how I learned programming for game development and how my scripts have evolved since I started Unity. While this won't be a tutorial video, there are definitely mistakes and improvements I made that you can learn from. The second part of the video will be very script heavy because I have a lot to catch up on. In the future I will try to show them alongside my development, so the videos won't be too dry. Hi, my name is Ilia and I'm currently working on a 2D Metroidvania game called Onshu. Before we get into the scripts, I want to tell you about my programming background and where I learned the C# coding you will see in this video. As always, I have left some timestamps in the video so you can skip to the parts you like the most. The first time I got into contact with programming was probably in the 11th school year. However, to be honest, I wasn't really interested in anything, and nothing stuck with me. After that I had a subject in university for 1 year that focused on programming, but of course I don't remember much of it either, because I never used it and it was over 6 years ago. So I basically started with no knowledge. Like most people starting game development, YouTube videos were my main source of knowledge, in the beginning. However, because I didn't want to just follow step-by-step tutorials until I finished my project, I always watched multiple sources on the same subject, compared them, and tried to use only those parts of the code I personally liked the most and felt were right for my project. While YouTube videos are a great source of knowledge, I had a lot of trouble leaving the step-by-step tutorial spiral, and I felt like my YouTube knowledge wasn't improving the way I wanted it to. On top of that, I wanted to create scalable code from the beginning, and most tutorials on YouTube were only good for small projects. That's when I remembered Unity Learn. I saw it in the very beginning of my learning, but they had no good tutorial on side-scrolling games, so I didn't check it out further. That was a mistake. When I went back there, I regretted not having looked closer. They have great tutorials and courses for beginners. I finished 2 of their first pathways and learned a lot. While I finished them a lot faster than their estimated time due to my knowledge I already had from YouTube, I can still recommend them for any beginner. The only negative thing I have to say is that it was a bit slow to find certain subjects you learned in the pathway on a later date. What are your experiences with learning code on the internet? And what would you recommend to new beginners? Tell us in the comments below. This is my learning journey for now, and now let's jump into my scripts. I will show you many of my scripts but won't go into full detail for everything. That's why I've decided to release the scripts on my Patreon to download. So if you think they would help you, feel free to download them there. Always remember that I'm not a professional, but this is sometimes better for learning anyways. I will also update them from time to time, of course. I will start with the player scripts. And while preparing this video, I also found an old script that we can look at to see the development I went through. This is my old player script. It looks like I had a lot of good things already implemented. The first thing I see is the old input system. This was before I changed to the new one. After that, we have a basic player movement, flipping of the character, depending the way he is facing, basic jumping with a Mario style jump, and the coyote time. And on the bottom I have the ground check with the raycast. Now let's see how the new player controller script looks like in comparison. Here on the top you can see the first difference. I declared different ground types to see on what the player is stepping on. Now the biggest change is probably the implementation of the new Unity input system. I have to say that I tried to have all the inputs in a separate script before, but strangely the jump didn't work in the test build. It worked in Unity, but inside the build it didn't work, and other people on the internet had the same problem. Because I didn't find a fix, I now have the input code split up into all the scripts that need it. Like here the player controller script, and then the attack script and so on. I have also implemented a player control that determines if you can give input or your input is blocked. Nothing crazy, but you'll see it in multiple places and you can also call it from other scripts. The movement is basically the same like the old script. And now to the jump. A part is still the same, like the Kyoto time, but now it also checks if the player pressed jump a little bit too early before he reached the ground, and it will still jump. After that I implemented a double jump. The player won't have it from the start, but it makes it easier for me to test out things. The landing check is just for the landing sound, and then we have a little upgraded raycast system that also checks for the floor type. And the last part is a knockback. This function will be called from the script where the player gets damage, and it also differentiates if the player died from the damage or just took a hit. If he dies, it gets forwarded to the next script that handles the respawn. This is everything important about the controller script. Let's go on with the next player script, about the player health. The first thing here in the update section is regarding the player invulnerability. Every time the player gets hit, he will get invulnerable for a short time, and here I ignore the collision with enemies during that time. Else you would be able to push enemies around. This part here is for the UI update of health points, and over here we have the take damage function. This will be called from the enemy script and will reduce your health. It does also call the knockback function in the player control script you saw before. There is also a flicker and music damping function that will be shown further down. Here the hurt direction gets calculated because I want to check if the enemy is below or above the player. If he's below or relatively on the same height, he will also get knocked up a bit, while if he is above him, you get knocked down a bit. There is a separate function for trap damage, because they won't knock you back and respawn you directly at the last checkpoint. And here we have the flickering and the music damping when the player gets hit. Next up is the player character script. Here I control different other things about the player. It checks if the pause button is pressed and sends it forward. It loads and saves also checkpoints. And lastly, it handles all the respawn after the player dies and walks into a trap. The last significant script is the player attack script. While there is only a basic attack for the player implemented, I didn't put too much thought into the scalability of the script yet, meaning it might change in the structure if I have multiple attacks and abilities and it gets too complicated. For now the script generates a collider 2D in front of the character and reports everything on the enemy layer. After that it checks if it's an enemy, something is structurable like a wall or a boss. It also gives energy to the energy bar and ultimate bar. Attacks for those are not implemented yet. At this part I ran into one of my biggest problems, the enemy scripts. First I planned to have the same 3 scripts on each enemy and put just an extra script on each type that made it unique. Then I realized that I have to change way too much in each script, and also a difficulty in calling the type scripts because they had different names. And this is when I learned about inheritance. But first let's look at the old script. Here at the beginning we actually have a perfect overview of the script. The enemy looks for the player. If he does not see him, he has a basic enemy movement that makes him patrol back and forth. And he has raycast checks, so he doesn't drop down a hole, and also he can see walls and if he hits one. After he sees the player he becomes aggressive and has other movement than before and follows the player. That's basically it from my old script. I scrolled through it real quick for those wanting to see the code, but remember this is my old script. With that being said, let's have a look at the new one. So I have to say before we start, I think the enemy scripts are still a bit chaotic, meaning I'm not sure yet where to put certain things, or if I should create more base classes or derived classes, and so on. The reason for this is the last big change with inheritance I made on the scripts. Anyways, I will probably rework them when I create a completely new enemy, but for now they are how they are, and let's look at them. This is the enemy base script. It basically has things in it that multiple enemies could use. For example, we have the patrolling with all the raycast checks, and we have the looking for the player section. In addition, we now have also a knockback function, a death function, and a crystal dropping function. Now let's look at the 2 enemies that already are using this script. First you have the crab 1 that just runs away from the player. Like you can see here, I had to create a new variable just so I was able to edit the stats in Unity directly. but I guess this is only needed during the tinkering phase, and the stats could be assigned directly to the base variables later on. Now first we see there is no basic movement called or needed, because the crab is sleeping and not patrolling. After it sees the player and wakes up, it will switch to the aggressive movement directly, which overrides the empty function in the enemy base. Here you can see a couple of conditions, like if it hits a wall it will stop and so on. But the main movement is running away. And here on the bottom we also have the wake up function. Now the second crab has the patrolling movement until it sees the player, but in addition it has also two states. One where it is underground and one where it is surfaced. So when it is still under the surface and close enough to the player, it will go into attack mode and attack the player. If it is further away or not surfaced, it will just walk towards the player. Now we have a damageable base and a damager base. In the damageable base, there is basically only a health system for enemies, chests and so on. The damage base is basically empty, because every enemy will have different attacks. So the damageable script of the first crab is basically only used to set its stats. And because it has no attack, the damager script is very empty as well, except for the collision damage it can deal. Now for the second crab we have not only the stats but also the eyes that disappear and being hit. And after reaching a certain health, the surfacing. In the attack script we have a special attack. I solved this attack with the trigger collider being activated by the animation actually. I'm not sure if this is smart or a good way to do it, but it works. This way I only need to check for collision with the player, similar to the body hit. So with that I covered the biggest scripts of my game so far. Of course I have still a lot of small scripts like crystal dropping, crystal counting, the checkpoint scripts and so on. But being honest, there is barely anything inside of it, and it is very simple and better explained in a lot of other YouTube videos or tutorials out there. Like I said, if you're interested in all the scripts, I will upload them for my Patreon supporters for free use and update them from time to time. Feel also free to comment if you think I should do something completely different in my coding, or if you have other questions regarding what I have shown. If you want to engage in longer conversations with like-minded people, feel free to join my Discord, and if you want to stay updated with my development, please subscribe. And of course, if you liked the video, smash the thumbs up button for me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!